All right. So, as my partner alluded earlier, moving on to the third leg of our show. Now we're gonna talk a little MLB. The MLB lockout ended after 99 days of work stoppage. Well, ending a 99-day work stoppage. Thursday, the MLB and the MLBPA finally agreed to a new 5-year agreement. So we're about to get some baseball, folks, but I think some of the key things that happened here, a minimal salaries. I think that was one of the big key parts that held up these two sides from agreeing. Minimal salary would start at $700,000 and increase to $780,000 by 2026. I think that's a big deal. Maybe to the baseball players. I surely wish my minimum wage equaled up to $700,000. But that's another story for another day. It seems like we're going to have a 16 draft lottery. I know that was one of the things they couldn't quite agree on how many teams would do the draft lottery. They couldn't agree on the top and the bottom. Teams can only option five. The teams can only option players 5 times in a season. I'll let my partner explain that one because I read that the first time and it was like, interesting, but I don't quite know. And then one of the important things that was brought to my attention is even though the season is starting later, we will get all 162 games to be played. They'll figure that out. I'll let my partner roll into that one. So, Jay, with all that said, this is the day we've been waiting on for them to finally figure it out. How do you feel about the fact that they finally came to agreement, and how do you feel about some of the terms that was agreed to? As far as like the minimum wage payment, as we call it, the draft lottery, et cetera, et cetera. How you feel about these changes that they agreed to?
Well, much like when we started broaching this topic when the lockout was, we're in the early stages of it. Nobody wins in a lockout, and when the lockout ends, it feels like everybody wins. So I think it's a upfront win for everybody. It's a win for the players, the owners. It's a win for Rob Manfred. Maybe he can stop getting beat up in public opinion for a little bit. And obviously, it's a win for baseball fans. I do think the thing about lockouts is you have the league and then you have the Players Association, and I don't think it's never like an equal fight, because like the owners and the league are kind of in control, because like they're the ones normally that say, okay, we're locking it out, because the players got some grievance. So the Players Association in all leagues is kind of always, swimming upstream, so to speak, in these negotiations. The thing about this one, based on what I'm reading, is the players, they made out pretty well. They got the minimum wage, minimum salary increase, as you said, and that was the previous minimum salary was below $600,000, so it went up significantly. It'll continue to go up through the end of the collective bargaining, which is set to end in 2026. 5-year deal, as you said. The voting, I think, was somewhat interesting. If you look at it, all the owners agreed that this was a good negotiation. Let's go ahead and roll. And then the breakdown of the union leaders, you have each team, all 30 teams have a representative, and then there's some executive subcommittee. I don't know what that means, but everybody from that executive subcommittee that are part of the players faction, they voted. They was no, this ain't good enough. But then 26 of the 30 teams say, yes, this is good. Let's go. The 4 teams that said, no, it's not good, were the Mets, Yankees, Astros, and Cardinals. 3 of those teams, really huge markets. I don't know if that plays a factor in how they were thinking of this, but I just think that was somewhat interesting, and it brings to mind some of this. I think it feels like some of the players and some of their representatives felt like they still had more that they could get, But I think it's a situation kind of like you had this conflict, this more than 3-month conflict, and it's just been so, everybody getting black eyes out here from like, no baseball. Like, okay, the league and the players, like, can y'all please come together and do something? There's got to be some sort of compromise that we can reach. And I think that's a big part of why, such a overwhelming super majority of these team reps were like, okay, yeah, we signing this thing and we gonna roll. I do think Rob Manfred, when he started his press conference, when he started off apologizing to the fans, I think that was important because, I mean, the fans, the people that, support this product and pay and, spend money going through the turnstiles and subscribe to MLB.TV and all these different things. Like, I think you have to pay attention to your paying customer. And like, when you don't have the sport, like I know the players and the owners, those are like the two main parties in all this. But the fans are a crucial third leg at that. And we know how critical the fans are to baseball, and they got to do a better job of keeping the fans they have and presenting their product to the next generation of fans. So that's a reason why lockouts in baseball, and the thing we saw when we were trying to get this thing reopened back in summer of 2020, that's why these things are so crucially awful for baseball. Like the NFL, as I said previously, they could survive this. Like they're going to be fine. They're not going to lose a bunch of fans over a lockout because the game is loved by, virtually everybody. It's not a huge age demographic. Like baseball obviously caters older. It's the older people that watch that sport primarily. But I think, again, the players, how well they made out with the salary increase and a couple other details that somewhat above my level of expertise, since I didn't delve into them all that much. But the players made out well. I think that's important when you talk about the union versus the employers, so to speak. And as for some of the other details of what this means, we get more postseason teams. I don't think that's necessarily good for the game, but I think it's good economically because, the more playoffs, the more money. So I think that's what that's about. I think that was more the league wanted more playoff teams to capitalize on some of that postseason revenue. So I think, and then the lottery thing was a big deal. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. They were split apart. Like it was one side wanted 4 teams, one side wanted 7, so they get it down to 6. And we've seen a lot of bad, like the Baltimore Orioles come to mind. Like they just seemingly every year, like you can check them in for 100 losses. And
the San Diego Padres. I can't ever remember when they was good.
They're pretty they're not as bad as they used to be, but there are definitely teams like that. And the Orioles for me are the first team that come to mind. So hopefully like that de-incentivizes like these teams after the trading deadline just punting, and next thing you know, you're filling the lineup of dudes you've never heard of ever. So hopefully that gets it together. And it's just a quick detail as far as the option note. All an option is like you bring a guy up from the minor leagues to the major league squad, and then you send him back down. That's like one option, I'm pretty sure. Okay. So now there used to be a team could send a player up and down as many times as they wanted. And now they're going to limit to 5, which I think is kind of good. Like, I don't think you should be able to just, send a guy up and down like 30 times or something crazy. So I'm glad there's a limit on that. And as far as this international draft thing, I know that was a major issue during negotiations. And I think there are other things that the players could have kept forcing, but I think they just backed out just because I think most of them said, okay, I think with this lockout, we've accomplished enough. We've gained enough ground, and we can table some of this until the next CBA negotiations, which, by the way, I really hope baseball, the owners, the players, and Rob Manfred look at this as a lesson, because come 2026, they need to have a lot of work done for the next CBA before we get to the 11th and 12th hour.
Right.
Because if you don't and you do this again, people are not going to take kindly to this, because this is just bad business, bad policy, and just from an optics perspective, you just look awful, and everybody does. So I really hope that doesn't happen come 2026.
All right, so Jay, I got a question for you. You said you made a comment about the playoffs. You said you're not a big fan of more playoff. What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, Drink, the analogy I guess I'd use is think about the expanded college football playoff that we've been talking about here recently.
Okay.
You and I both know the farther in the standings you go down, or the college football playoff rankings, the less and less quality opponent or the quality team you're getting in there. It's no different in baseball. When you go down to, now you're going to have a situation with 12 teams. So you're going to have 6 teams in each league. So, I mean, you could have in 6 divisions, 2 teams from every division make it in. And there's a lot of times where some of these teams that are making it, or could be like 6 games over 500. You're gonna have some really average teams make it in the playoff. And because of that, I don't think the quality of play is going to be that high early on in the early rounds, or however it's set up. I do know both teams that have the best record in each league, they'll have a first round bye. But some of these teams that barely make it in, it won't be the highest quality of baseball. And it's the same thing we talked about, like in college football, we have a hard enough time sometimes getting a 4th team in the playoff that's worth the number 1 seed's time. I don't think it'll be no different in baseball. So and think about the NBA as well with this play-in tournament. I mean, the Lakers in the 9 seed, they'll be in the play-in tournament, and they're about unwatchable right now. And they're not the only ones, but they're not the only ones. But the farther down and the more teams you let in, you're not going to get the highest quality of action. So it is good economically. I think they'll make more money, but I don't think it won't be the best product, because you're not just selecting the best teams like used to be 6, 8, and they've slowly but surely been expanding it out more and more. And the same thing we said in the NFL when they've went to 7 playoff teams in each conference. So now you've got 14 instead of 12. The Chicago Bears a couple of years ago. Yeah, stop, get out of here. That's all it is. More is not always better.
Okay. And then one more other question for you. Now, I remember when we was talking about this weeks ago, it was something about pitching. It was like, I can't remember exactly if it was about a pitch count, or
it was the pitch clock that we talked about.
That's what it was, the pitch clock. So did that get tabled for now, or do you know?
I don't think, based on all I've read, I haven't seen anything more about the pitch clock. But what I do know is there used to be I think the commissioner had to wait at least a year, from when a rule is proposed and it's okay, this is a good rule. I think they had to wait a full year before actually implementing it. And now the commissioner can implement a rule within 45 days. So what that means is if the pitch clock gets the green light, let's say tomorrow, then by May it could be enacted. So it's pretty significant, not only for the pitch count, but for any new rules they want to just pop in. For example, a artificial intel strike zone, or whatever they want to do with that, to not have umpires call balls and strikes. If we ever get to that point, it's not going to be something that we'll wait very long for. It'll get approved one day, and then a month and a half later, it'll be in. I think that's the more significant development than just the pitch clock.
Okay, very well. Oh, so baseball finally got their act together. Now, with that said, I didn't necessarily see when the season going to start. Is it still going to start?
It'll start
the original.
opening day got slid back 1 week
To
to April
7th.
7th. But yeah, the
Okay.
big thing was, I think the original, hey, we got to have our crap together was like February 28th. It's been like almost 2 weeks from then. So they did baseball, like, I think they canceled the first couple series and maybe the first couple weeks, but they will play a full 162, as you said in the opening. And I think they're just going to have way less off days. And so if that's the case, one thing to watch is some of these bullpens and these pitchers, like you're going to see a lot of tired bullpens, and you're going to see a lot of arms be used, perhaps more than you usually would, I think.
Very well. So listen, man, I'm glad baseball got their act together. As we see more and more like mandates go down, I'm hoping, I was just, I don't know, man. Like when we talked about this a couple weeks ago, you seen what I said. I was like, yeah, we're gonna miss like the first 2 months because like they don't care. They're just gonna argue about it. So I am glad to see that they was able to come to the table, get an agreement, and like you say, the players have made they got some pretty good leeway with this one. We come back in 5 years, we'll see how that roll. But hey, man, before I got to give a shout out to old Rob Manfred, man, and Tony Clark over here. These two dudes, probably took a lot of smoke behind this, but Rob Manfred, he made it happen. Now, hopefully, like you said, when this comes up in 5 years, I'm pretty sure Rob Manfred is still going to be the man up there. Hopefully, they be a little more proactive and get a lot of this out the way. Because like you said, baseball ain't the sport that can really just sit around and not be played and expect fans to just be like, oh, we got time. We'll wait on baseball. We got time. Not, and I told you this, not with the USFL coming into town. They'll be playing spring football now. Don't know how popular that'll be, but I do know one thing. If you ain't got no competition on TV and you the only thing smoking, then everybody's going to be watching. So now that baseball back in the pocket, not I would assume that their fan base and their viewership will stay about, where it is. So we'll see, man. But hey, there it is, folks. Y'all heard it. MLB is back.